Here's why every artist needs to write their origin story. So what exactly is an origin story, and why is it important for you to not only have one as an artist, but also for you to share and market your art? And this, I think, is one of those things that so many artists completely miss, and therefore so many artists are missing out on sales. An origin story is basically answering this question of how did you become an artist? And what are some of the obstacles that you had to overcome in order to become an artist? And also, what are some of the themes and the subject matter that you explore in your art, and why is it important to you? And I think that so many times artists don't think through this because maybe they just don't think that they have something meaningful to share, or they don't actually realize how important it is to gather collectors by telling their story. And so I want to talk about this a little bit more in depth and share with you why it's so incredibly important. Hello, I'm Wendy Brightbill. Welcome back to my channel. And this is one of the things that I learned very early on. And I think that I somehow lucked out because the gurus that I was listening to early in my own creative practice and in my own business talked about how important storytelling is in order to market your art. And so somewhere along the way, I heard that it was important for me to tell my story. And that's what I've been doing all of these last 15 years, is just consistently showing up on social media and telling my story on a regular basis. And so why is it so incredibly important? It's important because people don't buy a piece of art. They buy a person. They buy an artist. They buy you. People like to know what is the story behind your art because they need to make some sort of emotional connection to purchase a painting. And so otherwise, what actually is going to keep them from going to Target and buying something that is mass produced? And if they are only buying art for the aesthetic quality, they're probably not going to buy directly from an artist. And so this is one of the most important things that you can do in order to establish yourself as a brand and to build an audience of collectors who are excited to purchase art from you. So let's go deeper into what are some of the most important components to include in your origin story. So I am going to share with you 5 main components that you will want to incorporate into your origin story. And I want to speak to each one and tell you why exactly each one of these elements are important to include in your origin story. So, step 1, the first thing that you really need to begin your origin story with is that spark moment. Where did it all begin for you? Have you always been an artist? Were you creative as a child? Or did you come to your creative practice much later in life? And this is where I am just going to share a little bit more of my own creative journey with all of you. So I actually grew up in a fairly creative home, and my mom had always encouraged creativity, and my mom herself was an artist. And so I grew up in a creative home, but I never really considered myself an artist. And I probably would have never called myself an artist if you were to ask me. I probably would have said something along the lines of the fact that I was good at art, but I never really called myself an artist until much later in my life when I was in a car accident and I sustained a traumatic brain injury. And that season of time, I went through a really difficult emotional patch in my life where I dealt with chronic pain. I was struggling with depression. And if you've ever had a traumatic brain injury, you understand a little bit about what that's like. So that was what was going on with me. And my mom gifted me a creative book that was a mixed media art book. And I started to paint and create the art that was in this book. And I fell in love with the process of making art. And not only that, it helped to bring a lot of healing to my brain injury. And I found that I was much more creative after my brain injury than I was before my car accident. And so that is really how my whole creative journey as an artist began, was in those moments. So why is it important to share this piece? Your collectors want to know more about you, who you are, and how you started. It's really one of the most important things that you can share with your collectors. So that's step 1. Oh, and also one last thing, it really, when you do share about your journey and your story and how it all started for you, it does allow for you to be more relatable to your collector and to your audience. And I think in some ways it allows for them to become more invested in your work than they would be before knowing sort of the backstory behind why you are an artist. So that's step 1. And step 2, I want you to start talking about the struggle or the turning point. So every great story has a challenge, a hurdle, something that the hero needs to overcome. Am I right? And this is true for every story that is written, for every movie that you've watched. There is something that happens when we share our common struggle or some sort of obstacle that we have overcome in our lives, it makes our audience and our ideal customer more invested in who we are, and therefore more invested in our art. And if they can make that emotional connection to you, they are more likely to purchase a painting or purchase a print. And it really does help you establish that relationship with your audience. So some examples, might be a time where you overcame some sort of self-doubt, or you had to go through some major change in your life, or even just the fact that you had to fight to be creative in your life, right? And so for me, when I share my story and my origin story of how I became an artist, I think it's pretty obvious what the obstacle was, and the challenge that I overcame was my traumatic brain injury, right? And so because of that, artists have made that emotional connection to me. Okay, and I think also as artists, we, through our art making and through our creativity, we are expressing our resilience as people. And so I think people and our customers really have a deeper buy-in when they see that from artists that they admire, right? Okay, so that's step 2. And step 3 is to speak to your inspiration and your values as an artist. So this is where you want to talk about what inspires your work. Okay, is it nature? Is it color? Is it memory? Is it spirituality? Or, something that, has a fun story of something you picked up along the way, right? How did your process of making your art come to you, right? And what is it that drives you in your art making? So for me, I always talk about color, because color is probably the number one driving element to my art process, to my art style. And almost every collector who purchases a piece of art from me, they talk about how my paintings just make them happy. They make them feel lighter, feel a sense of joy. And I am able to do that through a sense of color. And one of the things that I like to incorporate into my origin story is the fact that when I first started painting with bright, happy colors, I noticed that my depression from my car accident actually started to lift. And so by communicating what inspires me in relation to my artwork and to my backstory, it gives people that little missing piece of, oh, you know what? I also love color. And when I look at your art, I feel this sense of excitement or joy or, happiness. And therefore, they want to have a piece of my art actually in their home. So why is it important? It helps collectors see what drives your creative vision. It creates alignment. If they have the same values or passions, they feel an instant bond with you and your work. And it might be that you sharing your story and what art making has brought to you, that they have a little piece of that in their lives, right? So maybe they are walking through some sort of difficult situation where they're experiencing depression, where they are having these, maybe they're dealing with chronic pain, and they buy one of your paintings or one of my paintings, and it's a reminder to them of my story. And it also brings some of that lightness and that joy into their own lives, right? And so this is why it is so incredibly powerful. And also, I just want to say, this is why art changes people, right? And I think one of the most beautiful things about being an artist is that we get to share this piece of our heart and have this thing that creates an emotional response in someone else. And that's the end goal in order to gain any kind of collectors / invested audience in your art and your art making process. So step 4, that was step 3. Step 4 is your artistic voice and what makes you different from other artists. And this is why it's so incredibly important for you as an artist to really develop your own personal style. And if you're still sort of struggling with that, I have several resources that might actually help you. I have a style quiz, and I will link that in the description for this video. And then I also have something called Style Starter Kit that gives you some steps that you can start taking today in finding your own style. But it is so incredibly important to be able to stand out as an artist. And I also just want to say that it's important that your message lines up with your style, right? And so if you are making art because it calms you and creates this sense of tranquility, and you love conveying that message, but your art is really bright and loud and crazy, then there's not an alignment there with your message and with your story in translation to your art making. And so I encourage you to really go deep in finding your own artistic style and finding a process that you love that matches up with the message that you want your art to be speaking. This is why it matters. Okay, so again, when we're talking about your artistic voice, the different elements that might convey different meanings is, what materials you choose to use, the colors that you select, the techniques that you incorporate, your own process for creating art. And collectors want to know really why they should choose your art over someone else's. And I think that there has to be alignment in all of these things, right? And so for me, color is one of the things that people see first when they're looking at my art. And it makes sense because that's what my story is all about, how color helped bring me out of a depression. So step number 5 in writing your origin story is just your big why. So what is at the heart of your work? And I don't know how many times I feel like I have said this and feel like I need to say this over and over again, but having an understanding of what is the message behind your art that you are trying to convey, it's so incredibly important to marketing and selling your art. It's going to make or break your marketing plan and your marketing strategy. So, what message or transformation do you want people to feel when they live with your art? So, thinking in terms of transformations is so important. What is your art going to bring to their home? Is it a sense of playfulness? Is it soothing and relaxing? Is it a pop of color? Is it thoughtful, thought-provoking and moody? What is it that you are bringing into your collector's life? Okay, so again, for me, like one of the major themes that I explore in my art making is this idea of taking beauty from ashes. And one of the main things that I explore is florals, because I feel like florals convey this sense of fleeting beauty, and they invite us as humans to take in the beauty in everyday moments, right? And we have to do that with flowers because they are here today and gone tomorrow. And so because of that, I feel like, that's the overarching message behind especially my florals, and also the whole color thing that I just shared with you. But it's an invitation to notice the beauty in everyday moments. And so when I talk about my art, that's what I talk about. And it gives people a better connection to my art. So why does it matter? Collectors aren't just buying a canvas, they're buying the emotion and meaning behind it. When they understand your why, your art becomes something deeply personal for them. And that's what we're doing when we do this. We want to make that emotional, heart-to-heart connection with our collectors. And, I have had the privilege of gaining so many collectors over the years. And what is really, really cool that happens when you find those collectors is that you build this bond between the two of you. And it's a really deeply personal thing. And some of my collectors have gone on to be some of my best friends. And that is such a cool experience. Oh, and I do want to say some of the collectors that I've had over the years, they have 30 plus, maybe 40, 50 of my paintings hanging in their homes, which is crazy bonkers to even think about that. But it is cool when you find the right people for your art. That's what happens, right? You develop this relationship and rapport with them that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise. And it goes so much beyond just purchasing a piece of art for their homes. So, in closing, when you take these 5 components, the spark, the struggle, the inspiration, the unique voice, and the big why, you're creating a very powerful origin story that collectors will never forget. And just remember that people are not just buying art. they are buying you and they are buying your message. A lot of times they're buying a feeling that they're getting from you. And it's so much more than just purchasing art. So I want to encourage you, if you have never written your artist origin story, please do so today. Go write it out. If you need to, do a brain dump into ChatGPT and have it help you organize some of your thoughts into a cohesive story that you can start sharing on social media today, please go do it. And then not only that, I encourage you to start sharing that with your audience. Start sharing it on Instagram, on YouTube, on whatever social media platform you are building your following. It is probably the most powerful way to build that relationship with your collectors. And I know for a fact it's one of the reasons why I have been so wildly successful at selling my art on a regular basis. So thanks so much for watching. And if you want to give me a shout out, I would love to see your origin stories.